folk tales, or folklore / mythology versus truth. And that's really kind of how I wanted to approach it. Again, coming from the outside in, not really understanding everything, I was like, how does this all work out? So myth is and this is the definition I looked up. Myth is a traditional story that explains the beliefs, customs, or natural phenomena of a culture. Myths often involve gods or supernatural beings and are often seen as sacred or religious in nature. Folklore, on the other hand, is a collection of stories, beliefs, and customs that are passed down orally within a culture. Folklore can contain myths, legends, fairy tales, or other types of stories. And the reason why I kind of wanted to talk about this is because the Bible actually does talk about myths. Myths and folklore, really what they talk about. And in 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 3-7, it says, "As I urge you when I was going to Macedonia, remain in Ephesus so that you may charge certain persons not to teach any different doctrine, nor to devote themselves to myths and endless genealogies which promote speculation rather than the stewardship from God that is by faith. The aim of our charge is love that issues from a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith." And then he reiterates the point at the end of his letter in 1 Timothy 4:7, and said, "Have nothing to do with irreverent, silly myths. Rather, train yourself for godliness." And so in these verses, Paul isn't saying don't have folktales, don't have entertainment, don't have imagination. But when you have all these things, when you do all these things, don't raise them above God's truth. Don't ascribe agency to the wind, but to explain it to a child. And that's a lot of times how folklore and stuff expands. I mentioned the Grimm's fairy tales, which are slightly different than folklore, but whatever. Is they try to explain something that's actually already explained by the presence of God. And so we create these things, these irreverent, silly myths in some ways, to explain something that's explained by God, that God himself is explained throughout his revealed word and throughout Christian history. He shows that, no, I'm the only God. I'm the only God. When he went to Egypt and freed his people from Egypt, he defeated all of the false gods. He holds counsel with gods and angels. He holds counsel with them and basically sits above them and judges them and says, no, I'm the one that is deserving of all and only worship. And so it's like you create these myths, you create these things. A good example in the Bible where, in a way, positively used folklore or folk tales is when he talks about the Cretes. Is like, the Cretes. Is like he doesn't deny that they're all a bunch of thieves and liars. He just goes, one of their own prophets says this. And that's folklore. Is like obviously exactly. not every Crete was a thief, obviously, but that was ingrained in it, and he let it go. And that's where then Paul changes and goes, but such were some of you. That's always what it is. It's you can have folklore, you can have myths, you can have all these things. You can have a wildly active imagination, but are you glorifying God in doing so and doing it that way? So that's how I was talking with this with a friend on Facebook when I just posted like, I didn't get the film because he was like, oh, this is one of my favorite films. I was like, I didn't get it, man. Tell me what I missed. And he went back and said, well, if I was trying to educate my son on this is how I would try to kind of bridge that subject of have a great imagination, invent wild and crazy worlds, but don't try to invent a world with no God, with no heavenly Father who's watching over you, and no Jesus who has died for you, and no Spirit that actively lives within you. Don't try to create a world like that. Create monsters, create villains, create heroes, but don't try to recreate God.
We hope you enjoyed this snack-sized taste of Popcorn Theology. Check out the full episode using the link in the description. Subscribe on YouTube for more content. Follow and interact on social media to share with others. And remember, you are not a mindless consumer.